Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a book haul revisit. So I'm going to look back at the book haul that I did in November of 2019 and take the books that I hauled and review how many of them I have read. So there were 4 books that I hauled in the month of November last year, which was one of the smaller book hauls by far that I did last year. It's more on par with the hauls that I've done this year because I've really scaled back book purchasing. I think in my first year on BookTube, I just kind of went crazy and wanted all the books. It's just something that happens. So I'm a little bit over that now. My wallet is definitely over that right now. So yeah, 4 books was an oddity last year, but it's much more common this year. And let's talk about them. We're going to start with one of the ones that I have not read yet. It's Susannah Cahalan's The Great Pretender. This is about, in 1973, a charismatic doctor convinced 8 healthy people to commit themselves to mental hospitals. They had to prove their sanity to be set free. Their undercover mission would change our understanding of madness forever. That gives you a pretty good idea of what this book is about. As I said, I have not gotten around to reading it yet. Susannah Cahalan had written another book about her own experience with mental illness, Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness. And if I remember correctly, she was incorrectly diagnosed with some form of mental illness. So that memoir was about her experience with that. And this kind of continues that thread of examining how we look at mental illness, how we treat mental illness, and whether or not that's right or wrong. And it sounds very interesting. I just haven't gotten around to reading it. I mentioned in my last book haul revisit that I'm starting to be a little bit more careful in thinking about books I want to bring into my library and a lot more intentional in how I do it. I think this is something that I am much more likely to listen to on audio than actually sit down and read in person. I don't know if it, like sometimes in nonfiction, the book itself has a lot of like photos and things like that. This does not really, so I wouldn't really be missing out on anything with it. So if I could do it all over again, I'd probably just get this on audio through the library and do it that way. But I have it here. I'm not going to unhaul it. I'm not going to get rid of it or anything like that. I'm still interested in reading it, but this is something that I'm much more likely to get myself on a hold list for like Libby or Scribd, something like that, and actually read that way. So yeah, still interested, very much want to read it. I also haven't heard very much feedback on this one. And what I did hear was mixed, but there wasn't a lot. So if you've read either this book or Brain on Fire, I would really be interested in what you have to say about it, because I'm wondering if maybe this is something I should prioritize on audio or in print in 2021, or because right now it just feels like this is something that's going to sit on my shelf until I get to it. And that again is kind of why I feel like I should be a little bit more intentional about what books I bring into my library and really think about whether or not I'm going to read it, how I'm going to read it, when I'm going to read it. Is it something I need to have now, or is it something I can visit later and maybe even get through the library? So that is The Great Pretender by Susannah Cahalan. Next, we have The Fountains of Silence by Ruth Sepetys. This is something that Steve Donahue actually kindly sent to me after I had skipped over it in my Book of the Month Club selections and then kind of regretted it because I was unfamiliar with Ruth Sepetys. And then after the selections came out, I heard a lot of really good things about previous books of hers and a lot of excitement about this one. So I kind of regretted not getting it. And then Steve was kind enough to send me a copy. So thank you, Steve. I have not gotten around to reading it yet, but this is something that kind of unlike. So here's the difference between these 2 books. The Great Pretender is something that's probably, like I said, going to sit on my shelf for a long time. Will I ever get to it? I don't know. So when it comes to thinking about being intentional about bringing something into my library, I probably could have done a little bit better there. With this one, I have actually thought about picking this one up several times this year because so the way I handle my TBR is everything is shelved in its place, but I pull books that are kind of TBR items out a little bit further. So I've thought about picking this one up several times this year. And it's good. It's just that I have other priorities right now. So once those kind of whittle down a little bit, this is something that I feel like I would definitely pick up and read and give a try. So I don't feel bad about getting this one in. Well, especially since I didn't actually pay for this one. So I guess I don't really have to have to feel bad about it at all. But even if I had paid for it, I think there's that when you get to that question of intention, I'm much more likely to read The Fountains of Silence than I am to get to The Great Pretender anytime soon. And that's just the way it is. So, yeah, still looking forward to it. And if you've read Ruth Sepetys, please let me know what you've thought of her in the comments down below. And maybe this is something I can prioritize in 2021. I definitely am not going to be getting to it in 2020. I can tell you that for sure. But because there's not that, for a couple of reasons. I mean, there's not a lot of time left in 2020. And I've prioritized other books for the end of the year. So I have and if I miraculously manage to get through the list of books that I have set aside to try to get to for 2020, there are other books that I would probably pick up before this. But this is something that I'm very comfortable having on my TBR and am likely to pick up and read in print form at some point. So other books of hers, I've heard a lot of really good things about Salt to the Sea, Between Shades of Grey, Out of the Easy, mostly Salt to the Sea. So if you've read this one in particular, please let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. Next is something I am absolutely going to read. I had actually put it on my TBR for the month of June. It's Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. I just didn't get to it. So in June, I like to read LGBTQ books. And this year, I really wanted to prioritize Black queer stories, or stories that featured Black queer stories. And this was one of them. And actually, I read Bernardine Evaristo's other book, Girl, Woman, Other, the one that won the Booker, co-won the Booker Prize last year. And that's why this one fell by the wayside on that June TBR, because I was already reading Bernardine Evaristo. And yeah, so I don't have to explain that much. But yeah, so I am very much looking forward to this. I really enjoyed Girl, Woman, Other, and I definitely want to explore more of Bernardine Evaristo's backlist. This is one that particularly jumped out to me and is something I'm very likely to read. This is something that would be even ahead of Fountains of Silence. So if I worked my way through the books I want to prioritize for the end of 2020, this is something that would be high on that list of things to pick up. But likely at this point, it is going to be waiting until 2021. So the most likely scenario for this one is actually that I will probably put it on my TBR next June in 2021 and hopefully get around to it that time, because there are a lot of books on my TBR. There are particularly a lot of LGBTQ books on my TBR, and every June it's really hard to pick which ones to prioritize. But I do think that there is high likelihood that this is one that I would get to in June. By the way, I realized I talked about what The Great Pretenders is about. I didn't talk about what The Fountains of Silence is about, and I haven't talked about what this is about. So this is the story. I forget the character's name. Barrington Jedediah Walker. He's 74 and is leading a double life. So he's married, he has kids, I believe he has grandkids, but he has been in love with his best friend, and they have been having a sexual relationship on the side for many of the years that he has been married. So it's about him and his dual life that he has been living, and his hidden sexuality. And I find that fascinating, especially since I believe he's from the Caribbean. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, he's deeply religious. But yeah, so I'm really fascinated in this book, and you can probably see why. And I haven't mentioned the publishers on any of these books. This is published by Akashic. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting to this. This is very likely to be something that I will get to in 2021, especially now that I have read Girl, Woman, Other, which was the Bernardine Evaristo book that I really wanted to prioritize for 2020. And if I like this one anywhere near as much as I enjoyed Girl, Woman, Other, I will probably be seeking out Blonde Roots by Bernardine Evaristo as the next book from her backlist to get to. So that is Mr. Loverman. Let's jump back and talk about what Fountains of Silence is about. It's kind of a YA book. It's kind of a historical fiction book. Basically, under the oppressive dictatorship of General Francisco Franco, Spain is hiding a dark secret. Meanwhile, tourists and foreign businessmen flood into Spain under the welcoming promise of sunshine and wine. Among them is 18-year-old Daniel Matheson, the son of an oil tycoon, who arrives in Madrid with his parents, hoping to connect with the country of his mother's birth through the lens of his camera. Photography and fate introduce him to Anna, whose family's interweaving obstacles reveal the lingering grasp of the Spanish Civil War, as well as the chilling definitions of fortune and fear. And there's kind of a back and forth there that reveals, like, the history of the war and things like that. It sounded very interesting to me. And if you have read Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one as well. The final book that I hauled in November happens to be The Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, which was something I read in January as a buddy read with Amelia Reads. And it also happens to be my favorite read of 2020, so far at least. There's a little bit of time for something to edge this out, but it has been my favorite read of 2020 pretty much all year long. And it's going to be very hard for something to steal the top spot from this. Although I do have a buddy read of Beloved planned next month in December. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so I absolutely loved this book. I'd heard a lot of really good things about it, and it really did not disappoint. I just loved it. It's the story of Milkman Dead. It is one of Toni Morrison's, if not the only book of Toni Morrison's that has a male protagonist. And it's about him and his family, and it's about in Toni Morrison's style, it's really about the lasting impact of slavery on this family and about the larger Black community at large in America. And it is such a beautiful, beautiful book. And one of the things that most impressed me about this is that this edition of the book has a foreword in which Toni Morrison herself talks about the book, and she talks about the first sentence of the book and how intentional every word is in that sentence to be sort of like a mission statement for the book. And the first sentence is, "The North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance agent promised to fly from Mercy to the other side of Lake Superior at 3:00. And the book opens with a man who's sort of a neighborhood eccentric throwing himself off the roof of a building and committing suicide. And that ends up setting a lot of the story in motion, although a lot of it happens when one of the characters who's there Milkman is fully grown up. And I just love this book, and it has so many really interesting and beautiful and sad things to say. There was so much to talk about in this book. I'm really glad I did it as a buddy read, and we went chapter by chapter, and within every chapter there was so much to say that we never felt like we were lagging. there was never any shortage of things to talk about in this book. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It is so good. So now I have read, I think, Home, The Bluest Eye, and Song of Solomon, and I am just starting Love by Toni Morrison, and I am just kind of in awe of her as a writer. She is so good. And by the way, I also recommended in the book haul last year the biography of her, which is called Pieces of Me. I believe it was available on Hulu last year. I have no idea if it still is, but however you find it, I would recommend seeking it out and watching it, because it gave me an even deeper respect for Toni Morrison as a writer and a human being than I already had. And I already had a huge opinion of her. I really admire her. And it's a great documentary. It's a wonderful book. So if you haven't seen the documentary, check out Pieces of Me. And if you have not read Song of Solomon, please check it out. So, small book haul. Only 4 books. Of the 4, I have only read 1. But the one I read is a doozy. It's so good. And like I said, I think Mr. Loverman is probably the one that I would get to next out of them, followed by Fountains of Silence, and then, The Great Pretenders. I'm not going to unhaul, but it is one of the books that I would talk about, specifically be referring to when I say I need to be more intentional with making book purchases. So take that as it will. But anyway, like I said, if you've read any of these, I would love to hear what you think of them. If you have recommendations based on these, if there are some you think I should stay away from, please let me know. The comment section is down there. You know what to do. And as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.